Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a fun little project as Ruhi of Rubies Bras reached out to me and asked if I wanted to do some pattern hacks for her Sahaara bra pattern. So the first one I'm going to be showing is this, which is the Sahaara bra pattern turned into a bustier. I had a lot of fun with this and I think it really has turned out well. I think it would be great for a New Year's Eve party or just lounging around the house, and it looks fun and easy and sexy. So in order to convert our Sahaara pattern, we're just going to need one additional measurement. So since I've already made this bra and I know how it fits, I put one of the ones I had already made on, and then I just measured from the top of the bra here down to where my natural waist would be on the side seam. So in my case, this distance is going to be 7 inches. That's the only additional measurement I needed to take in order to convert this pattern. Let's move down onto my sewing table and I can show you how to get started.
So the first step is going to be altering the pattern, and you only really need to look at the frame piece as well as the back band. So when I measured on my body, I found that I needed this side seam to be 7 inches. So all you really have to do is extend this pattern piece down until your side seam reaches your desired length. So here is what my pattern piece looks like after I have done that. So you can simply see that I've taken the original pattern piece here and just extended it down. I've also added an additional 3/4 of an inch to the bottom of my piece. That's in addition to that 7-inch side seam, and that's to accommodate my 3/4 of an inch elastic that I'm going to use along the bottom of my bra. So if I was going to use a different width of elastic, I would add a different amount on for that seam allowance. Now, if you are particularly straight, or maybe you're athletic shaped, maybe you're postmenopausal, something like that, one thing I would check is just to make sure that you're going to have enough distance on this portion here. So if I measure mine, and I'd like to do this on the front pattern piece because the front pattern piece is supposed to be using a stable fabric. So if I measure the distance that I have on mine, I get 7 inches. So since this is 1/4 of your body, so half of the front, if I do 7 times 4, that gets me 28 inches. And sure enough, that is my waist, 28 inches. So I'm fine. But let's say that you don't have a very defined waist. You might find that you need to change this angle coming off over here. So what I would do is figure out what 1/4 of your waist is. So whatever your waist measurement is, divided by 4, and then measure from the center fold line over. And that's going to be where you need your side seam to end. And then just draft in a new line like this. And then you want to still make sure and check that it's the same length that you need it to be. So that's all you have to do for the front pattern piece. And then for the back band, it's going to be very similar. I just wanted to extend it out so I get that 7 inches along my side seam measurement here. So I put my piece in and just extended those lines down until I reached 7 inches. Of course, I also included my 3/4 of an inch seam allowance for my bottom band elastic. So I also looked into the fact that I was using a specific size of hooks and eyes. So when I measured it against my side piece here, I realized that my back band was going to be too high to accommodate my hook and eyes. So I wanted to cut it just a little bit lower in the center back. And in order to do that and get a nice curve, I did have to move the strap attachment point over just a little bit. So if you compare the old to the new, you can see that the old strap attachment point was here, and then the new strap attachment point moved over by about 1/2 of an inch. I should mention that while I'm doing this, I am using the Sahaara first version, the 1.0. She did release a 2.0 version, but the things that were changed weren't necessarily things that I would like changed on my pattern. I really liked the way it fit as is. I believe on the 2.0 version, she has the center front seam coming up a little bit higher, and she moved the seam line on the cup so that it's closer towards the center front. I personally always like my seam lines more towards the outer side just because I have sort of like east-west facing chest. So those weren't things that I was interested in changing in my pattern, so I'm going to go ahead and use the 1.0. So with those two new pattern pieces done, I went ahead and cut out all of my material. So first I have my frame piece. This is cut out in both the fashion fabric as well as a non-stretch sheer cup lining because I wanted to have that sort of sheer look behind it so you could still see the skin. I played around, I played around a little bit with perhaps doing a black opaque center panel like this. But I decided I didn't like how it looked as much, so I scrapped that and went with the completely sheer version. Next, I have my cup pieces, both inner and outer cups, and again, I cut them in my fashion fabric as well as a non-stretch sheer cup lining. And lastly, I have my back band cut out, and this is in a power net, which is quite sturdy, quite firm, which I think will be really, really nice. Again, going with that sort of like my nude skin tone color. I'm going to be using all black elastics and findings for this. I think it's going to look really cool. So let's get started in constructing this bustier. First, I'm going to start with my cups. That tends to be the place I always like to start. I want to make sure that I have both an inner and an outer cup, which I do. My outer cup is a little bit wider on this pattern, that it helps me to be able to identify it. I also want to make sure that I have the right sides facing up so that I have the two pieces that are supposed to go together. So my first step, as always, is going to take these two pieces right sides together along that curved edge. And then I'm just going to pin these in place. There is a notch mark to sort of help you along the way to make sure that you are lining stuff up appropriately. Obviously, I'm using a relatively small cup size, so I don't have very much curve on mine. But the larger the cup sizes, it might have more dramatic curves to accommodate a larger amount of tissue. So now I have that pinned together. I have the inner cup on top. I'm going to take my lining pieces, then make sure I have the inner cup, and then pin that on top of there. And then my last step is to take the final lining piece, again matching that curve with the curve I already have pinned and pinning that on top of there. So the order should be 2 lace pieces and then 2 lining pieces. Now with my 2 cups pinned into place, I can take this over machine and sew it 1/4 of an inch along that curved pinned edge. So now I have my 2 pieces sewn. I've used a straight stitch because this is a stable or low stretch fabric, so I don't really need to worry about this seam having some flexibility, and I do think that the straight stitch is a little bit stronger. I also don't bother with back tacking at the start or end because both of these seams will be gone over again with another line of stitching, so it's not as necessary. So once that's done, you can open everything out. And if you've done it correctly, it means that your seams are completely encased inside of the cup, so there's nothing that's going to be rubbing against your areola or anything like that, and it looks quite nice from the outside. So the last thing I'm going to do on this cup is go ahead and take a zigzag stitch and sort of sew down this center line here, just so it stays flat and nice and smooth. The reason I use a zigzag stitch instead of a straight stitch for this is because I find that the zigzag is a little less noticeable, especially on a textured material like this. You can see with that line of zigzag stitching how much flatter this tends to lay, and it starts to really take the shape of your cup. The last thing I'm going to do on these cups before I set them aside for a little bit is to finish this center front edge, so the edge that is the neckline itself. I'm not going to worry about this edge over here because that's going to be finished later on once it's put into the frame. So I'm going to be using fold over elastic for this. This pattern is designed already to use fold over elastic, so you don't have to make any adjustments to it. If you wanted to use a picot elastic on this edge, you would have to add that additional seam allowance so that the picot elastic has room to turn around. For my fold over elastic, I tend to do it in a single pass. I will lay my material on so that the edge of the material is in that center fold line of my elastic. I'll fold it over and then just sew it in a single pass with a zigzag stitch. If you're concerned about your ability to maintain that edge position, you can always go through it first with a basting stitch with the fold over elastic open, and then do a second pass with the fold over elastic closed, because that might be a little bit easier. So now that neckline is finished, you'll see that I have left a little bit extra on the upper portion here. I haven't really conceptualized yet how I want the straps to attach, but it's always better to have this than not, so I've just left it there for the time being. So now I'm going to bring up my frame piece here. I'm going to do something a little bit different this time, because I know that I'm going to want to put some elastic on the outside of this bustier to sort of cover up this seam line here. So I'm actually going to attach the cups into the frame in the opposite way that I normally would. So I want to have my lining and my outer frame lined up with each other. So normally in a bra, you would want this right side facing up and the right side of your cup facing up, and then you go like this and pin it into place. I'm actually going to do the opposite. So I'm going to take the wrong side of my cup, touching the wrong side of my frame, and pin it into place that way. This is going to mean that the seam allowances are going to be on the outside here, but because I'm planning on covering that up later, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to pin my first cup into place on my frame with the wrong sides together. So I've got my first cup pinned in. I'm going to go ahead and pin in the second cup as well. So now it's all pinned into place, and it can look really, really scary. I do think this is the hardest part of making the Sahaara bralette, but if you take your time and go slowly, I think you end up with a fantastic result. One thing to keep in mind is at this very center front point here, you do want to make sure that your cups are crossing about 1/4 of an inch down from the top of that point, because there is seam allowance on there. So now I'm going to take this over to my machine and just sew at 1/4 of an inch with a straight stitch along my 2 pinned edges. When I get to the center front, I'm going to sink my needle and then pivot and rotate the project and then keep going. So now I have sewn the cups into place here. You can see how you do get that nice front center sharp point as long as you take your time and go slowly. We are doing this inside out, so I have all of my seam allowances sticking to the outside now, and then on the inside we have a nice smooth clean finish here. This is a soft cup bra, so I'm not going to worry about putting any under wire channeling in here, though if you are a larger bust size, you might find that that's nice, that it would offer some additional support, some additional structure along that seam line. Certainly not necessary for my bust size. So as I had said, I am going to cover this seam allowance up with elastic. Before I do that, I want to make sure that I have all my boning in as well. That way the elastic that I put on here serves that dual purpose of covering up the seam allowance and covering up the end of my boning channels. I'm just going to use the traditional boning channel that we normally use in bra making, and I'm going to go ahead and use that to put in my boning on here as well. So in terms of placement of the boning, it's entirely up to you. I'm choosing to start it up where that cross cup seam is up here, and then I need to figure out where I want it to land on the bottom of my garment. So I've sort of sketched that line in here on my piece of paper, and that's just going to help me sort of align things and make sure that I have it in the right place. So if I use a pin, stick that in there, then I know that's where I'm heading for over there. And on this side doing the same thing. So my boning is going to go like that. And then this one over here is going to go from that center cup seam all the way down to my other pin like that. So now I have those guard markers in place. I can go ahead and cut my underwire channeling just to make it a little bit easier to move around and manipulate. So as I had said, the bottom of this is 3/4 of an inch for elastic. So I'm not going to need boning in there. So I'm going to cut it just a little bit shorter than that. I probably will need to trim it again. I am just erring on the side of caution and doing the same thing for this side as well. So I'm going to take this over to my machine and sew this channeling into place by doing an edge stitch on either side of the channeling. And here's what it looks like when it's finished. And with that single application, we've covered up both that seam allowance between the cup and the frame, as well as the ends of the boning channeling here. It looks really nice from the outside, and I think it looks really nice from the inside as well. Again, because we have sort of constructed it inside out, our seam here is nice and smooth. So the next step I'm going to do is to attach my back pieces to the garment. And then once those are in place, I am going to go ahead and put boning channel along those side seams as well, in the same manner that I did with this boning channeling here. So here is what it looks like. I did sort of the same technique that I did with the cups, where I sewed the back band pieces on so that the seam allowances were facing the good side, and then I made sure to cover them up with my boning channels here. That means that the interior of the bra looks nice and clean. There's really nothing here to sort of irritate you on those edges, and then the outside cleans everything up really nicely. I'm quite excited with how this is looking, and we're almost finished. So the next step is going to be, we need to put the elastics along the bottom and the top edge. I think I'm going to start with the top edge here. I'm going to be using a fold over elastic as well, the same elastic we used on the neckline here, and I'm going to install it in the same exact manner where it's folded along this edge and then zigzag stitched in. I do want to make sure that I capture the ends of these boning channels here securely inside of that fold over elastic, but I've also gone over the ends a couple of times just to make sure that they're secure. So here I have finished that upper edge here, and you can see what it looks like. When I got to the top of my cup, I went ahead and butted the two fold over elastics, the one coming from this side and the one coming from this side. I butted them together and zigzag stitched them so that I have sort of a wider strap attachment point. I think that's going to look the best. Now, much like the rest of the bra, I'm going to go ahead and do this part sort of backwards as well. So traditionally you would sew the picot elastic in so that just the little bits of picot stick out at the bottom. But I want to make sure that it covers up the end of my boning channels here so that I have the cleanest finish. So I'm actually going to do it inside out. So first I need to decide what it is that I want to see when the bra is worn. And I think I still want to see the plush side of the elastic. I think that looks the best. And so what I want is the side that I want to see facing up from the inside of the bra, and the picot edge, that's the little bumpy bits right here, I want those facing towards the upper side of the bra. I'm going to sew this in with a zigzag stitch as close as I can along that picot edge of the elastic. I do want to make sure that when it comes to the boning channel areas, I don't capture the boning channel in that stitch. So I want to make sure the elastic is sitting just below where that boning is. So now I've done the first pass of that bottom band elastic here. And here's what it looks like from the inside and the outside. So now I've clipped that off. And this elastic is then going to flip around and then cover up the bottom edge of the boning. But obviously before we do that, we need to make sure that we put our boning into the garment. So I'm just using plastic boning for this project. I do have spiral steel boning, but plastic works a little bit better if you ever plan to wash your garment. And for something like this, where I'm not actually looking to like have significant waist reduction or anything like a corset, I don't think it really matters. So I'm just going to sort of eyeball the length that this needs to be and then cut it with my craft scissors. Next, I'm just going to take this nail file and sort of clean up the edges just so they're less pokey. And then I'm just going to go ahead and slide them in. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that process for the rest of the boning channels. So now that I have boning in all of these channels, I can go ahead and finish up my bottom band elastic by flipping it to the outside of the bra. I'm going to use a 3-step zigzag stitch and stitch as close as I can to that straight edge, trying to make sure again that I close up the ends of these boning channels, but that I don't sew directly into the boning itself. And now the bottom band elastic is sewn on and it's really coming together. So we just have left to do is the straps and the back closure. So for the straps, I've cut 2 lengths of about 18 inches each. This is different than the pattern. This is different than the pattern just because I prefer to have fully elastic straps. So I am going to take my slider, which is the thing that looks like a figure 8, and run my strap up through the center and back down again, like so. Then I'm going to fold that in half and secure the end with a straight stitch back and forth, and do that for both straps. Now that the sliders have been secured, we can go ahead and put the rings on the other end. Then lastly, fold the strap back up and put the free end through the slider. You should have a adjustable strap that looks like that. So this is another matter of personal preference, but I always like to have my adjustable side on the front of my bra. That way that I can adjust it while I'm wearing it, versus when it's on the back of the bra, I have to take it off or have somebody help me. But some people might find that it's a little irritating to have it on the front, so you can put it on the back if you want, but this is just how I like to do it. I'm going to take the side of the strap that does not have any hardware, and I'm going to apply it along this arc on the back here. So now the straps are attached on. You can see they're attached here, and I've also gone ahead and taken that loop through the front of my cup as well to complete that. The last and final step is just, of course, to attach the rings, the hook and eyes. So the recommendation in the pattern, and it's something that I have used a couple of times because I think it always ends up looking really, really nice, is you first sort of fold this flap out of the way. I just pin it back so that it's not in my way. And then you take this over to the machine and do sort of like a preliminary basting stitch just to get the side of the bra into your eye closure. Then you can take that flap, close it, and do your final more decorative line of stitching to complete it. And with that, my bustier is complete. I'm really happy how this one turned out. I hope you enjoyed watching.